Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a seriously fascinating, high-stakes chapter of geopolitical history. Today, we're unpacking the founding of Las Trampas, New Mexico. Now, if you visit today, Las Trampas just looks like this beautiful, sleepy mountain village. But as we're going to see from our historical sources, the reasons for its settlement were born out of a desperate, multi-directional war. It was actually founded to function as a literal frontier fortress. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the frontier under fire, then we'll look at the human buffer strategy, move on to the settlers of Las Trampas, explore designing a fortress town, and finally wrap up with the fortress church. All right, part 1, the frontier under fire. To really get why Las Trampas was founded, we have to set the scene of 18th century New Mexico. It was an incredibly dangerous, isolated territory. Robert Martinez, the state historian of New Mexico, captures the reality of this perfectly. He says, in the 1700s, New Mexico was in a state of war for the better part of 100 years. So we aren't talking about a brief skirmish here. This was a century-long conflict. The colonists and Pueblo people were facing a true, everyday existential threat. Historical maps from around 1790 really highlight this vulnerability. You had Hispanic and Pueblo people huddled incredibly close together, primarily clustered right along the Rio Grande, leaving them entirely exposed to the vast open plains that surrounded them on all sides. The pressure on these tight-knit settlements was just relentless. They were getting hit with multi-directional raids from nomadic plains tribes. We're talking Comanche, Apache, Ute, and Navajo forces. It was this brutal, cyclical exchange of violence and human captives. And making matters so much worse, the Spanish crown was totally unwilling to invest money or troops to defend the area. Imagine paying your taxes to the crown and getting zero financial or military support when your life is literally on the line. With no help coming, local governors were entirely on their own to figure out some creative, life-or-death solutions to stabilize the frontier. Which brings us to part 2, the human buffer strategy. This was the radical geopolitical move devised by Governor Tomás Vélez Cachupín. Think about this for a second. Put yourself in his shoes. How do you defend a territory when the crown straight up refuses to send you troops or money? What's your move? Governor Cachupín's grim yet highly calculated answer was the buffer settlement. The whole reason Las Trampas was founded wasn't just to be a nice farming community. It was deliberately placed right in the crossfire. The idea was to create a physical and human shield up in the high mountain passes to absorb the shock of incoming raids, completely protecting principal settlements like Santa Fe and Santa Cruz, which were sitting safely about 17 miles to the southwest. Let's move on to part 3, the settlers of Las Trampas. Because you have to ask, who exactly signs up to be a human shield? The answer, at least initially in 1751, was just 12. 12 original families walked into this danger zone to form the nucleus of Las Trampas. It is absolutely wild to think about the courage, or maybe the desperation, it took to agree to this. But despite the overwhelming odds against them, they didn't just survive, they somehow flourished. By 1776, this little settlement had incredibly grown to 63 families, which was nearly 280 people. A really crucial part of this human buffer strategy relied on Genízaros. As defined by the historian Fray Angelico Chavez, Genízaros were North American Indians of mixed tribal derivation. Many of them were formerly captive people who were basically offered a very dangerous bargain. They could finally gain land ownership and some autonomy, but only if they agreed to settle and defend the absolute most dangerous edge of the frontier. So when you look at the demographics of who actually settled Las Trampas, you see this incredibly diverse, multicultural melting pot. You had Genízaros looking for social status and land. You had Tlaxcalan Indians recruited from Santa Fe, who already had a long history of serving in the frontier militia. And you had mestizos. For all of these groups, settling Las Trampas was the ultimate high-risk, high-reward real estate deal. Yes, they were literally risking their lives, but it was basically their only ticket out of a very strict colonial caste system to become independent landowners. All right, part 4, designing a fortress town. Let's look at how this intense need for survival actually shaped the physical town. When you are a human buffer, every single architectural choice you make is dictated by defense. Las Trampas was designed in very strict compliance with the laws of the Indies, which was a royal code for town planning. The settlers built a tightly packed, super compact central plaza. They surrounded their low adobe buildings with a solid defensive exterior wall. And they ran an acequia, an irrigation canal, right through the settlement to guarantee they had internal water and food security. The whole point was to build a walled fortification that could deflect attacks and outlast a siege. And that brings us to part 5, the fortress church. Because what do you do when those exterior walls are breached? You need a last line of defense. At the very heart of this fortification was the San Jose de Gracia Church, built between 1760 and 1776. Now, traditional European churches of the time had soaring stone spires, huge glass windows, and delicate carvings. But a frontier fortress church? It is built completely differently. The walls are made of massive adobe, literally mud and grass baked in the sun, and they are 4 to 6 feet thick. The windows are just narrow slits. The roof is supported by heavy wooden logs called vigas. It doubled as a literal sanctuary because it was explicitly designed to withstand arrow volleys and direct physical attacks. But here's the catch. When your walls are 6 feet thick and your windows are tiny slits, the inside of your church is going to be pitch black. To solve this, they used an absolute stroke of architectural genius called the transverse clerestory window. This was a unique invention by the Franciscan Padres of New Mexico. You really don't see it anywhere else in the world. They raised the transept roof a few feet higher than the rest of the building to hide a horizontal window. It perfectly floods the altar with this brilliant, mysterious light, but still keeps the building entirely sealed off from outside threats. It's just a brilliant piece of survival architecture. Which leads to our final concept, an accidental time capsule. The intense danger and extreme isolation that made Las Trampas such an effective buffer actually had an incredible side effect. It preserved their 18th century culture almost perfectly. This isolated community spoke a unique local Spanish that borrowed words from Tañuan, Comanche, and Ute. The threat of attack was so constant that residents quite literally didn't feel safe building homes outside their defensive plaza until 1853, when Fort Burguen was established nearby. Because they were so cut off, American fashions didn't even influence the town until the 1920s, and that stunning San Jose de Gracia church remains completely intact and unaltered today. Ultimately, the founding of Las Trampas is this incredible story of social mobility, immigration, and unbelievable human resilience. It was a town literally built to take the hits so others wouldn't have to. But it leaves us with something to really chew on. Las Trampas survived centuries of violent conflict and total isolation. But as the modern world continues to encroach closer and closer, how long can this beautiful 18th century time capsule actually hold its ground? It's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for hanging out and joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.